Live now, Senator.
Okay, I couldn't hear the audio, but now I hear you. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, committee. Good morning, any members of the public that may be tuning in. This is going to be a welcoming session for Scott Moore, our new committee assistant. We're going to have him talk a little bit about himself and how things have been going thus far, which I think Allison and I would say very well indeed. I'm very impressed with Scott and his sense of humor and his joie de vivre, so to say, which is really good. So, Scott, you know the members of the committee by their faces already, but why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself, and then Alice and I will tell our impressions, and then you can tell your impressions of the work so far and your what you think is good and what you have questions about, et cetera. It'll take about 15 minutes to do that.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Senator. My name is Scott Moore. As some of you may or may not know, I am the son-in-law of Linda Myers, which Linda used to be a state legislator, and she mentioned that that might be helpful in my career here, and it might be hurtful depending upon which party I'm talking to. But I have been a damages expert for securities litigation for the past 19 years. Senator Brock, I did do some testimony on behalf of Fidelity a number of times, by the way. Yep. But with COVID, the way the cases happened to fall with FINRA and the SEC, they had done a halt, as it were, for some of the cases. So no fault of anyone's. My job was, I like to say, COVID-ed. So unfortunately, we were laid off for now. And so this kind of opportunity arose, and it seemed to fit in with my schedule and my interests. And I've been to the State House a number of times. I think I've mentioned in my bio that my 5 times great-grandfather was a state legislator back in the 1800s. So it kind of fit for my schedule and my interest for now. And so I applied and thankfully was hired and put with you guys. So far, I think that it's going well. There is basically a fire hose of information thrown at us. And it's kind of, I mentioned that it is kind of a playing whack-a-mole and Jenga and Tetris all at once. But so far, I think I've gotten everything, I'm above water right now. And if the water's too deep, I'm splashing around and having some fun. So it's all good.
Great.
Do folks have any comments or questions? I have a couple, but go ahead.
Well, just tell Linda hello for us.
100%.
Yes. Well, and if it's okay with all of you, I'm going to get cell phones and everything to Scott so that he has all of our contact info, and which I promised him, and we'll get to him today.
Okay.
But Scott, I think you're off to a great start, and we're so appreciative. Well done. You've gotten us online. You've gotten an agenda out. You've done really well, and in fairly short order. So I think we're very grateful, and it's delightful to have you on board.
Well, thank you.
I feel similarly. Scott's taken everything we've talked about in terms of dealing with legislative council and setting up the agenda, and done it very efficiently. But more importantly, he's asked questions that I think are the right questions, and has even come up with a few ideas to help us. So it's pretty remarkable, because it's a pretty complicated world we live in here in terms of hearing scheduling and juggling people's time frames. So when one witness wasn't able to comment a certain time, Scott was able to say, well, we could switch this or something like that. That's really a good start. So I'm very pleased so far.
Well, thank you, sir.
Senator Ballant.
Scott, welcome. I think that you will come to adore us in all of our quirkiness. And I just want to say, for folks who may be watching, that Scott is, like in every committee, he's the point person for the committee. So if you see something that is posted on our website about an issue that you might want to testify on, please reach out to Scott at the email address and the phone number that's given on the website. He is the one that helps us to schedule all the witnesses, and that is always the best way to make sure the information is getting to the chair and the vice chairs to go through the committee assistant. So welcome aboard.
Thank you.
And one little project that Scott's working on right now this afternoon is the multitude of reports that this committee gets. Some of them are more important than others to our work this session and long-term, but we've decided, the vice chair and I, that the easiest thing is there is a report section on our committee website, and Scott is tracking down all the reports that had to go to economic development, and he's going to post them all there. So we may be.
We just lost you, Michael. Michael, you're somehow got muted.
I see that. I don't know. I didn't touch the microphone, but so he's going to put all those in one place, and it should be very easy for us to find them when the time comes. Okay. Scott, do you know how at this point to pull up the agenda on the screen? If not, we can just go to it ourselves.
I can do that for you, sir.
Okay.
And I do apologize in advance now. My mom taught me using sir and ma'am all the time. And so I know sometimes people feel awkward about that. So I apologize in advance for that. But let me pull up the agenda.
Could we change that at all?
I'm happy to address you with whatever honorific makes sense for you all.
I know you're taught to address us certainly in public by senator, and that's fine. But sir gets me a little uncomfortable. I'm sorry.
My apologies, Senator. I'll just keep it to Mr. Chair or Senator, as it were. Let me grab the agenda.
And it's on,
right now.
obviously, it's also on our website, so you could just pull it up.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so we are in the middle of committee business, or starting committee business on Tuesday, January 4th. So as you know, we have a bunch of issues that are sort of carry forward from last year. And tomorrow we're going to start off with S101, which is will be on the action calendar for tomorrow. And I've sent you all some information on that. We as a committee, I'm not sure it has to be by committee, but I'd like it to be by committee. We have to take a position on S101. And for all those who have not been in it as deeply as I have over the last couple of weeks, you may recall that the bill did a few things as it left the Senate. The first thing, the purpose of the bill, if you read it, is to promote housing and affordable housing and housing in general, to build a greater number of units in smart growth areas and denser housing through a number of approaches. One of my pet phrases is always to say, we can't only keep throwing money at housing, which is clearly probably the most important thing we do. And the governor and the legislature have put a lot of money of the federal dollars towards building and converting housing. But there are also many policies, as this committee knows, that we can change in terms of land use policies and other policies that can make housing less costly, faster for developers to build, and therefore stimulate the economy as well. So in this bill,
Michael?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. An email popped on the screen that said someone in IT couldn't see our stream. So I just wanted to make sure before you go on, we know if we're live. Scott, do you?
Yeah, it says we're live.
Yeah, I did have one of the other committee assistants, Faith Brown, send me a note saying that she couldn't see us. And I did say that I thought we were there. And she wrote back, said that she did see us now. So.
Yep,
um,
and we're getting another email. We're getting all these emails popping up in front of your screen that you're sharing.
Yeah. So, and I believe we are, but I will go and double check. 1 second here. I'm going to just stop the share for a second, senators. So that way I can.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now on YouTube, and it is up, and the screen is up, and we can hear you on YouTube.
Another email. We're getting all these emails popping up in your screen.
Yeah, it's there.
I can hear myself.
Exactly.
How weird in a delay.
So let me take this opportunity because this is a perfect opportunity. So one of the comments that I heard repeatedly last year was, and this is not directed towards anybody, but that I run a fairly informal committee where people can jump in at any time without raising their hands. And I think it's worth trying to raise your hand and be recognized before we go forward. However, this particular one is an exception. If something like this goes on, just talk up because I might not see you instantaneously, and that deals with transparency and the public. So let's talk. But we're going to try this year to have people raise their hands and be recognized. And maybe that will go more smoothly. I always thought we were a small enough, friendly enough group that we didn't need necessarily to do that, but let's try it that way this year. So, okay. So in 101, there were, and as it came out of here and finance, it had three important elements. One was a Bylaw Modernization grant program. That also did survive and pass the House, but the bill hasn't been sent to the governor yet. But it also did have the money in the budget bill. So on its own, it went off with $650,000 to do bylaw modernization. And my understanding is that the grants are going to be announced on Monday or Tuesday. And the ACCD is very happy with the program. They made some tweaks to the substance. I don't think they're major in how they've designed the program. But we're going to want to take a look at that. The second thing that we did in our bill was to expand the tax credit program, downtown tax credit program, to neighborhood development areas. That did not survive the House, nor did our raising of the cap to 4.75 million. It's presently at 3 million. And that needs to be reconciled with the House. But in the Senate version, even though Economic Development and Finance passed it, appropriation did not raise the cap. The third important element was the bylaw, the non-duplication of sewer and water permitting, so that if a town had sufficient review on its own, they wouldn't have to go through state review. And that did pass the full Senate, but it did not survive the House. And additionally, I hope I'm not losing everybody. I assume there's some familiarity with this, but the House also added what has been referred to as a mansion tax to raise the property transfer tax on homes that sold for more than $1 million, and to use that money to help the mobile home tax credit program to convert or restore. I think when we also dealt with this in another bill. I think it was 457 or 437 in finance. The Finance Committee did not support that in that bill. So the Senate has weighed in somewhat on that proposal as well. The bottom line is, as I've written people, is that this is really an unusual amount of differences on important issues between the House and the Senate. And I could stand up, or the committee could stand up tomorrow and ask for a conference. I think that's a little premature to do that until we take some more testimony on what the House did and whether we can see a better path forward, because the committee of conference scenario has a lot less ability to be creative in terms of a solution than if we were to concur with further proposal of amendment that we can talk about it among ourselves. We could also have conversations with the House on it and maybe come to a better solution. The two choices, if we were going to go to a further concurrence with further proposal of amendment, would be just to talk about it among ourselves. And it's going to take several days, if not a couple of weeks, to figure out what we want to do, and just let it sit on the calendar until we're ready to make a recommendation. Or we can order it to lie until such time as we're ready to make a recommendation, or an unusual step, it's rarely done, but we can also bring the bill back into committee. So I haven't decided where I would like to go to make a recommendation to the committee yet, but at the very least, we're just going to let it sit there this week, and we're going to start hearing about it tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Any comments on that overview of 101? Senator Brock.
I think you've done a good summary, and it certainly brought back fond memories of our discussion of this last session.
Right.
That being said, I have a bill on affordable housing it's not a particularly long bill. I'm getting the remainder of my co-sponsors to sign on, and so I will probably introduce it tomorrow, but I want to distribute it to the committee to perhaps take a look at this as to whether or not any provisions of what I'm suggesting, again, in the event of any of you are in favor of them, could be added to this in the event that we amend it in any way going forward, or that we treat it separately, again, depending on how the committee decides. But I think it may be relevant to what we're talking about. And it does things like it expands priority housing projects a little bit beyond what's there right now. It also takes a look at appeals and the appeal process regarding Act 250 permits, because repeatedly we're told, and we need some more anecdotal evidence to confirm, that appeals are one of the things that drag out the ability to build more affordable housing in the event that a single person objects. And the appeals process is running an average of 334 days whenever there's an Act 250 appeal. And this is designed to perhaps deal with that by expanding the environmental court on a temporary basis, hopefully using federal funds in order to get some more housing jump started, or housing that is stuck moving. So
Yeah,
I think I sent a copy of this to you earlier, and I don't know if you folks have looked at it yet.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I think we all have housing bills that are coming in, and all would like to see maybe parts of them added on to this as a vehicle. It doesn't necessarily have to go that way, but it is an opportunity. But it's also interesting that I've had communication with several House members, and they also would like to see, housing is a big item. This bill, if you look at its purpose, is exactly what we all want to do. You know, increased housing in smart growth areas and as policy. In addition to that, natural resources in the Senate has interest in this as well. So it's a very complicated, procedural, strategic move as to, it gives us opportunities, but we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We may just have to keep it fairly narrow to this bill and then work on other land use bills as they evolve. But I appreciate you raising it, and there's going to be a bunch of housing bills by next week that are in our committee, and they will, and that's part of the reason why I raised these three choices of, you know, ordering it to lie, passing over it, concurring with further amendment, or bringing it back into committee. So we'll have to make that decision, but we'll do it as a group. Okay. Thank you. And then also tomorrow we have the veto bill S79, which in my mind also deals with smart housing development, from developing dilapidated housing that is cheaper to develop than to start putting new shovels in the ground. As many of you know, I've been trying to see the extent of the governor's opposition to this, and we'll hear more about this. I think it really comes down to, in my mind, what the exemptions that he objected to in his veto measure in terms of mom and pop housing, whether they should be subject to complaint-driven inspections or not. The two other issues in my discussion with the fifth floor, I think, are not issues. They had to do with whether this was a complaint-driven process. And I think we always intended it to be a complaint-driven process, but maybe our wording was not tight enough, and we can clear that up with the lawyers. And the other was, could you throw a nuclear option at a landlord of shutting down the apartment when there was a minor violation? And again, we never intended that to be the case. And technically, if you read the bill, there was the possibility some rogue inspector could do that, and we can clean that up with language. So I think we're really down to what inspections go. I think they didn't want camps to be covered. We never intended camps to be covered, so we can make that clear as well. So we're going to hear from hopefully Tate Brooks, and Josh Hanford, unfortunately, is ill, as I understand it. We may hear from Sean Gilpin as well, and David Hall on that. So does anybody have any questions on S79?
So, Michael,
Yes, you're the one person not on my sidebar, sorry.
I was gonna
Right.
say, yeah, what's challenging, I was gonna ask if you wanted us to raise our hands physically or with
Yes,
the,
yes, I do, and you probably did, and that's another exception to the rule. If a few seconds pass and I don't acknowledge you, please speak up. Go
okay,
ahead.
well, I'm finding all the exceptions today, so thank you. And when you put the hand function from Zoom up, it's supposed to bump you into someone's visibility, but if you prefer the physical hand, I'm happy to do that as well.
Let's do both, if we
Okay.
can. Yep.
I don't have any concerns about S79 as you laid it out and the existing continued tensions. But I just wanted to go back to, in a probably slightly different way, echo Randy's, Senator Brock's statement about other provisions in S101. And the only thing I wanted to add there, I have some of those, I think, in a new piece of legislation. The only thing I wanted to add is could be a question, but I talked to some housing advocates who had thought that S101 included consideration of some kind of end or phasing out of single family zoning. When I talked to Legislative Council, they didn't see that as addressed in the bill. And so that's included in my new bill, is instead of the baseline being ending, having 4 single family homes on 1 acre of property as low density, you could have 4 units in one parcel or one piece of property rather than sort of 4 single family homes. So I would like us to have that discussion about ending single family zoning. I think that would really help with smart growth.
Right. You're back to S101, and as we're looking at things to potentially add, if anything, to that, that seems to be right on point. It's a zoning thing. So, but it's going to be a long discussion as to what we can and do. I seem to remember, and David Hall and Ellen Tchaikovsky will remind us. I seem to remember that we actually wound up passing something on single family homes. And it wasn't as aggressive as a lot of people wanted in terms of 4 units being developed on an acre. I think it was something that said, if you're developing a single family home, duplex development had to be considered along the same lines as single family homes. I'm not 100% sure if that is law yet, but we'll check that. But we may have addressed that. Senator Clarkson.
Yes, we definitely discussed this multifamily abilities in downtown areas. So I know we had the discussion, and I thought also, Keisha, that it had been included. So, I think we need to clear that up, but it's definitely a key
Okay.
piece for us
Yeah,
to discuss.
and it would have been 2 years ago, Keisha, so it would have been before you were here. So, okay, let's move on. I'm having trouble. Oh, you have control of the screen. Okay. And then on Thursday, I've asked Joan Goldstein to come in and bring whoever else she wants, but there's a raft of economic development bills that we put in motion. Most prominent is the GAP or bridge program that has been underspent by tens of millions of dollars. But there's also brownfields, there's also transitional projects, there's also the Montreal ambassador, there's VSET, there's workforce development stuff, all the things that were in the omnibus bill that the House sent us at the end that we tinkered with and passed out. We need an update on all of those programs. And I think that will take us through the entire morning. Interestingly enough, if you haven't read, you should at least read the executive summary on the transformational programs and the GAP recovery programs. I found it curious that with both the House and the Senate wanted more targeting of the program, so we tightened it, and maybe it was tightened too much or made it too hard for people to apply. But when I read the report, I'm pretty sure it was very short, and I would have expected the administration to come up with some suggested changes for the program, but I think they're deferring to us. So we'll have to see where we go with that. Any questions on Thursday? Senator Ballant.
More of a macro question, Mr. Chair. Is your thinking that we will have several housing bills in motion that we will use as vehicles, or an omnibus housing bill? Certainly we have lots of issues that we want to address here. And I'm just wondering if you know strategically how you're thinking of putting your arms around this. Is it trying to get some smaller wins and victories early on, so we know that we have that momentum? Just wondering if you could share with the committee what you're thinking is at this point, because I know there's lots to do here and we all care about it.
Yeah, there is a lot to do, and I'm not sure that it's controversial. I mean, when you start getting into Act 250 stuff, obviously I've got scars on my back from that one, and I find myself telling pretty much anybody who ask is, housing has risen to the point that we can't, try and achieve perfect or theoretical ideological change at the expense of practical change. I was at one point thinking that we can do something with 101 and make it somewhat comprehensive and do all this stuff. I'm starting to think, but it really is dependent upon how things go in the next week or so, that we should get some not minor, I think there's significant victories. I think the wastewater thing, I think the House has come around a little bit on that, and that would be big, and get that done. And I'm guessing that we're going to wind up with a significant committee bill on the rest of the stuff, as opposed to looking at one. We'll look at all the vehicles, but I don't think it's necessary that we have to have pride of ownership here. I think we're all trying to achieve the same thing, and these ideas will be worked up, and we'll do that. I know some of us remember Senator Mullen loved to do omnibus bills, and that might be the easiest way to go. And I want to work with the House too, because it's something that I think is so large that we can't work in a vacuum. We got to know what they want to do, whether they go first or we go first, or how we do it. I've had calls with, Amy Sheldon already, and with Tom Stevens, and with Mike Marcotte. So, I think we try to work collaboratively, and if that doesn't work, we go our own way. That's the best I can give you now, but it's really subject to change. Any other questions on Thursday, economic development? Good. Department of Labor. So we had the Act 51 situation that went through. I know the federal government's intervention was poster child for controversy in the fall, but there were other things that we asked in Act 51 of the department that we want an update on. I've written the committee. I don't know where we're going to go with it, but I'd like to have a discussion with the department. Is some of the things we did last year in terms of making it easier for victims of COVID to collect unemployment, whether that's necessary. We hung our hat on extending it to the extent of 30 days past the executive order. There is no executive order right now, but we certainly have a lot of people probably taking off time from work. And we coupled that with no chargeability on the employer for that. I don't know whether we want to pass any COVID related things right now, and I really haven't heard people come to me with complaints about that, but I just want to know how the department is treating somebody who's, is out for a few weeks because of COVID and doesn't get paid, doesn't have paid leave, or doesn't have personal leave. Is anybody coming to the department for unemployment benefits, and how are they being received? My understanding is that right now, from my past history of working with the unemployment program, is you get disqualified for 1 week, and then you can start drawing. They could disqualify you for up to 6 weeks, but the pattern is just to give you a 1 week. But I think we just need to know more about that. I also, with all these witnesses, I'd like to know if there's anything in budget adjustment that's going on with any of their programs. So we are not in the dark in terms of what the Appropriations Committee is doing, because as you know, money can translate into policies. I don't, and then worker shortage obviously is right up there with housing and other stuff. And I'm wondering what the department's agenda is for that year and whether we have independent ideas for that. Allison and I met with Charlie Kimball and Mike Marcotte, and we agreed, didn't we, Allison, that they would sort of start to take the lead on that topic. It's a big topic, and we've got to somehow narrow our focus early on. So we said that would be fine.
Right. So,
Senator Clarkson.
To that end, we chatted about Commerce taking the lead on workforce issues, and that we would, when we talked with Tom Stevens, likewise, we would do the initial work on housing. So to that point about whether we have several housing bills, given it's one of our top priorities for this session is housing and workforce, it'll be interesting to see. One of the challenges of large bills, I think, is that when they go to the House, they go to several different committees, and it's hard to coordinate action on them. And the plus of keeping bills smaller and focused is that they go to one committee, or maybe at the most two, with easier sort of action timelines. So I think that as we think about that, you know, the differences between 79 issues, S79 issues and S101 issues, it may make sense to keep them separate in some ways.
I appreciate that. Obviously, I'm more than aware of that exact
I know you are.
conundrum. Omnibus bills also have some positives sometimes. It makes
Yep,
people
yep.
compromise more readily. So we'll just have to wait a way through. I want to mention one other thing on Friday that I've asked the department to possibly give us some numbers on is minimum wage. I know that's been very controversial in the past, but I don't want to see effectively the hard work we did on minimum wage be lost 2 years from now when everybody's getting their 5% increase and people have nothing, virtually nothing to show for it, because in the real world, people are working for well above the minimum wage. So I just want to hear the department's feeling on perhaps going to $15 as we had proposed in 2 years' time. So the platform from which the inflationary increase could go up on would be $15 versus $12.55. So it's just a preliminary talk with them to get some numbers and their feelings on something like that. Anything on Friday? We're it's 11:36. I want to go around the room and hear some general thoughts from people if they have them at this point, but I feel like it's going to be a very intense and productive, hopefully productive session in terms of policy this year. Okay, so let's go around the rooms. I see Senator Brock with his hand up first, so just general thoughts.
I guess we've got a lot to do.
Yeah,
And, time pressure always at the second year of a biennium means we don't have as much time to do it as perhaps we would like. I do mention I've got another bill pending. I think, again, I sent copies of all of you on workforce that deals with a number of issues that we've talked about at various points before, including some loan forgiveness situation, very limited in nature. It deals with also some issues regarding apprenticeships, some issues regarding waiving of licensing requirements, particularly where there's workers coming from another state that has somewhat different licensing requirements. So there are a bunch of, it's sort of an omnibus thing, and there may be bits and pieces that you like. There may be bits and pieces that you probably don't like. Again, I think I sent it to you before, but what I'll do is I'll take that bill and also the affordable housing bill, which is relevant to this committee, and I'll send you all copies of what I'm proposing again, so you can take a look at it. And because again, it may be relevant. Now, when we talk to unemployment on Friday, one of the things we asked them to do was also to look at fraud. And they did do a fraud report. I've got a copy of it. I don't know if all of you have copies of it. I won't say I was disappointed in the report, but there's a lot of consultant speak in it, and not as much practical action as I would like to have seen. I have another bill that pending that has some criminal penalties back in. And you recall, we got stuck on that last year because some folks didn't like convicting people of crimes with the notion that we might be roping in people who simply made mistakes. And the bill that I'm proposing this time is really dealing with people who are using false identities and stolen materials in order to do it. And we had a major problem with fraud while we were on break. And so that is something that's high on my priority list in dealing with the unemployment folks.
so thank you for that. We will be hearing about that on Friday, and we actually have the consultants scheduled for, I think, a half hour next week on
Good.
their report. The And the UI task force did make some recommendations on that as well, mostly deferring to the consultants, but they did make some recommendations. Yes, and Scott, as I said, is pulling together all the reports. Will be on our webpage. Just so we're clear, what I said about the pro tem and the leadership from both House and Senate asked the committee leadership to get together to try and scope out the session a little bit so there would be more coordination than might be typical. And we did that, and we said that Commerce would deal with workforce shortage. That doesn't mean we are just going to sit back necessarily and wait for them to tell us what they think. Just like in housing, I know Natural Resources in the House is working on a land use housing development bill, and I've talked to Amy and Seth Bongartz about it, and they're going to be working on that. But we may, and they are hoping we'll take the lead on it, but they're going to be working on it and giving us their general thinking on it as well. So we can do that on workforce shortage as well, even though the original idea or the initial idea is to let them send over a bill. So it's not hard and fast rule. So we can definitely look at your bill and talk about it and see where we're going. This is all a work in progress. And a lot of things. So anybody else want to talk in general about the session? Going for Senator Rahm.
Thanks, Michael. And I became Senator Rom Hinsdale.
I am sorry.
Out of session. It's okay, but thought I'd say that out loud.
I was there.
I know. Thank you for being there. So just to sort of a little bit build on the housing piece and address what Senator Clarkson said, which I respect. It's never easy to decide which one. Some of us were in the House when the last major omnibus housing bill was advanced in the House. So at least it's something, they're familiar with advancing. And I think it helps show Vermonters, who are watching from the outside, that we have a really comprehensive package to bring more housing online. It sort of gives them one place to look for things. As I think I sent to the entire committee this large package of ideas that I've gathered from the housing community, the realtors, advocates to end homelessness. So it has a lot of pieces in it, and would just love to discuss that maybe with David Hall present. In that bill is also something I know might be in consideration here or in finance, which is a TIF extension. I think it relates to economic development and housing, though probably having been on House Ways and Means, I think it falls squarely in finance. So it may not make sense to consider here, but I have heard from a lot of communities that in the pandemic, it's been very hard and uncertain to put proposals together to advance projects. And many of them would be really grateful for that TIF extension. Finally, Mr. Chair, I know that you said, you felt like a lot of the energy for paid family leave was, coming from the House, and we all have been watching with bated breath to see what happens to the Build Back Better bill in Washington. I think it would be good, as we just get a lay of the land, to better understand what the current need looks like for paid family leave and see where that provision landed in Congress. That I think it's at 4 weeks, but its likelihood of passage, just so Vermonters have a hook into understanding the future of paid family leave and our consideration of it.
Okay. Well, as folks know, I was a lead sponsor of that bill. It's, it has obviously opposition from the governor, at least in the form we've taken it. But I think, let's see what happens in Washington, and let's see what the appetite is for it in the Senate. It makes me think of one thing I didn't mention on S79, and I want to be transparent on that, is that we did have the votes to override a veto in the Senate, and I have consistently heard that that's not the case in the House. but obviously that is also, it's on our calendar with a veto message. That's also another possibility of a direction to go on that if the House tells us they think they could possibly override. So I just wanted to be transparent on that. Senator Clarkson.
Yes, I think that actually a new bill addressing some of the issues that I think we can constructively do that were issues in the House. I think with those provisions added or changed, that we may be able to get to yes with more members of the House. So I'm optimistic that we can get there and that we will end up with something. I also would like to actually get that minimum wage bill across the line. You know, we will go through this, and I have concerns about sliding back to, I heard this morning on VPR, they did a great piece on the minimum wage in New England. And obviously, with the exception of New Hampshire, we're the lowest. And I would really like to have us on par with Massachusetts and Maine and everybody else. And also, I would just remind us that even if we get to $15 an hour, that is not the full livable wage in many parts of our state. So it is something I'd really love to get across the finish line. Same with paid family leave. If we had paid family leave in place now, we wouldn't have to ask these questions of Vermont Department of Labor in terms of our extending some of those UI provisions for COVID, because people could be out and be ill without sacrificing their jobs or putting them in jeopardy. I sort of on behalf of Michael and me, I did a big omnibus economic development bill, and I believe it's already is in, but it's a whole range, and it also has the mini TIFs, it has the capital, regional capital investment programs. It has a lot of things that we will want to be doing, the recovery grants. It gives us space and puts up on the wall, as it were, a lot of the work that I know we want to continue to address. So I just wanted to make sure we had a place for it. And of course, housing, which is near and dear to my heart, that I want to make sure we get the registry across the line and the pieces of S79 that I think are so important. So those are some of the many priorities, and also the creative sector. Stephanie Jerome and I have worked on a bill. She's introducing it in the House, and I have introduced it in the process of introducing it in the Senate. And it would, as we know, particularly places that businesses that are dependent on gathering, like our performing arts spaces and our museums, have been really, as the hospitality and restaurant sectors have been affected by COVID. They are ongoing major economic challenges for these businesses. So this is a bill that addresses the creative sector in particular. So those are some of the additional priorities I have.
Okay. I don't see Senator Balint's hand up, so that's fine. Senator Rahm?
I forgot one piece, which is I have a direct-to-consumer shipping bill at that, and we have new members of the Department of Liquor Control, and they have been, doing a lot of work to figure out how to support our growing, spirits industry alongside beer and wine, while maintaining, a sense of management and control and healthy behavior. But I think, this was a smaller piece that was really, really important to the industry.
Yes, in response to that, we will have a liquor bill and perhaps a sports betting bill. The liquor bills have historically started in Tom Stevens' committee, and we had very little objection to the work that they've done. And I think we'll probably go that way because, they have divided jurisdiction, and that's one that falls in general housing and military affairs in the House, and it could take it off our plate before crossover. But we will be looking at that. There's a bunch of issues that I've heard around liquor that are worthwhile. We have a new commissioner who wants to meet with us, and I'm hopeful we can do something in those areas. Senator Brock.
Well, as we talk more about liquor and gambling, perhaps we should change the name of the committee to the Committee on Economic Development, Housing, Vice, and General Affairs. And therefore, we could be more inclusive. I just wanted to add to what Senator Clarkson had said regarding the creative sector. I do have a bill that reinstates the Vermont Film Commission, but charges it with coming up with a better mission than they had before, and also a better process. You know, I frankly have gotten increasingly tired of seeing movies that are featuring Vermont and Vermont scenes for tourist relations that are actually made in British Columbia and places like that. Even what's the fellow's name who's our film expert in Vermont as a movie maker?
Well, we have several. Jay
Well,
Craven,
We had Jay-
John O'Brien,
Yeah, John O'Brien
Bess O'Brien.
this at this time, but I know I've spoken to him about it. I did speak with Jay Craven. And the classic example is Jay's latest movie about Vermont is being made in Massachusetts that has a film commission that actually does subsidies. Now, we may not be able to do the kinds of subsidies in amounts that they have, but we can certainly figure it out to make it more attractive to make Vermont a film destination, which theoretically it is on paper. But the fact that Super Troopers 2, which related to the Vermont State Police, was made in Canada, as I recall, because again, we're not attractive. And I know that Molly Gray has also come up with that idea. And she was going to have, in fact, a meeting to bring together folks who are interested in this. And it's going to supposed to be rescheduled, but that is on her agenda as well. So that bill is pending. And again, I think you folks have a copy in the event that you want to sign on to that at the end here. We still have a day or so to go.
Okay. Don't we have until the 14th?
We have
No,
I'm
I
trying to get in though, so that when we have meetings like this, where
Right.
committees are considering what to do, that it doesn't get left behind.
Absolutely, yeah.
right. And
Uh,
yeah, that will be a robust conversation, given that we decided to end the Vermont Film Commission because we just couldn't compete. So with other states with deeper pockets. So it will be, I think it's a good conversation to have again. And
I think
figure
it
out
is as well.
different
There are ways to compete that don't involve pockets quite so much. And it's the same kind of argument that we've seen before about how states attract new businesses. It isn't always the deepest pocket. It's the people who make it clear that they want you and they want your business and they're willing to do something to make it at least attracted to a limited extent. People make decisions on emotion as much as they do on pockets in a lot of cases.
Amen. Okay. Well, I think that's been a productive first start. We're ending early. I want to thank Nathan and everybody else. And unless people have any other questions,
Scott.
what did I say, Nathan?
Nathan.
Oh, Scott. I hope that's the last time I do that, but I'm sure it won't be. Scott, we can go. No other questions off YouTube. Thank you. And thank you, members of the public.